this is Dominic, wedding DJ.
And this is Serena, wedding planner.
And together we are the Wedding Duo. We are here to talk all things weddings.
Planning a wedding can be stressful, but we are here to help.
So before you say, that's it, we're going to Vegas, don't go to Vegas.
Let's have some fun.
Join us as we answer your wedding questions and help navigate planning one of the biggest days of your life with the Wedding Duo. Hello, everyone. We are back for yet another episode of the Wedding Duo podcast.
We are back, and we have a riveting topic today.
We do.
Riveting, right? And it's one of those things that should be talked about more, I think, especially in today's world, especially what we've all just gone through with COVID and all that good stuff.
You know, I have a story, too.
Oh, you always have.
I have a story to start us off. But I'm finished. I didn't interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Is it a long story or a short story?
No, not too long.
Okay.
So whenever I'm talking with couples, usually initially, one thing I always ask is, how'd you meet? Because I'm just trying to get to know my couples a little bit, And the best how did you meet story was the bride was saying, I was working out, doing CrossFit. Somehow she did something, she hit something and she knocks herself out cold, right?
Oh.
The paramedics arrive. She's still out cold. The dude, you know how paramedics do it where the EMTs or paramedics, they sometimes say, you're in the back, I'll drive. And then they usually switch, sure. I guess is what I understand. So the one dude who was supposed to drive said, hey, do you mind if I jump in the back this time? So when she comes to, she's like, and of course she's probably bleeding and disheveled, maybe drool on her face. And she's like, oh, hi. And this, who was a very good looking groom, by the way,
okay, is
looking down at her like, hey, how you feeling? And she's like, oh, hi.
I'm fine.
So he found her attractive in her unconscious state. And then they met in the back of the ambulance going to the hospital. Best story.
Yeah.
It was meant to be, right?
So what does that lead us into?
That leads us into stuff happens in the world that you're not prepared for. See where I was going with that?
I do. Now I do. And that is why we have Alyson joining us. I'm going to let Alyson introduce herself and talk a little bit about her company and that kind of good stuff.
How about that story though, Alyson? Did that set you up or what?
It was perfect. I couldn't have thought of a better. But so my name is Alyson Locacciato. I'm from Front Row Insurance Brokers, based out of the LA office. We also have offices in New York, Nashville, a little bit all over the US. And Front Row Insurance Brokers specializes in the arts, film, as well as special events. So we have created an online event liability platform specifically for events and specifically for weddings. So we are so excited to partner and kind of talk about our program. And I've been with Front Row for about 3 years now. So yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it was kind of what I was talking about initially. Like, this is one of those things where couples are like, really? Like, what, we got to talk about insurance with our wedding, right? But it's important. And Alyson can speak a little bit to this on a personal level. And why is that, Alyson? Because you recently got married, right?
I thought you were going to say she recently went through a hurricane and an earthquake in the same day.
Yes, just Los Angeles is just wild, right? But yes, so I was a COVID bride. We were engaged and we had set a date for March 20th of 2020. And about a week before or so, we started hearing about the seriousness of COVID. And we were kind of like, I was just like, it's just, avian flu type scare. And we just kind of proceeded with everything. And then as everybody knows, the world kind of stopped. And we had less than a week to, pretty much just stop everything. And we were devastated. We didn't necessarily know what to do. And that just really made it the urgency for me and our company to look into insuring events, especially weddings, just because it was close to my heart. It was something that was not anticipated, which insurance is always there for things that you don't anticipate, right? But it definitely brought out so many different things that we wanted to focus and share for different couples, just to kind of be able to offer a product for something that will help you in the worst case scenario possible. Right?
How many times? How many times did you reschedule?
3.
3 times.
3
That's
times.
like, we went through.
Breaks my heart.
We went through. Obviously, we were on the front lines. We had a full calendar, and suddenly it was like, stop! Everybody had to find a new date, and it was madness. But people like you that were on the very month 1 of the pandemic, we have very few couples that had to do 3 times. But they were like, sometimes they were 1, 2. They eloped. They called it. I mean, there were all kinds of scenarios. But the fact that you had 3, you rescheduled 3 times. I commend you. That was you two are going to make it, because if you made it through that, you'd be great.
Right? Yeah. Going through planning 3 weddings almost from scratch, and I mean, I know you guys know, but so many vendors went out of business too. So, which was so unfortunate, but just like our bakery, for example, I was so excited for this cake that we had. And then I had a specific vegan cake that I was so excited, looked forever. And then they went out of business, and it was just so sad for them, but also so stressful as a bride. So I really sympathize with so many people wedding planning. I know there's always things that jump in the way last minute. But even our photographer, the day of our wedding, he got COVID.
Why not?
I know, right? I was just at that point, I was just add it on. I was like, we're ready. We're going to do it no matter what. But it ended up being a beautiful day. Actually, some of the pictures and our blog posts from on Front Row Insurance, a broker's website, is actually me and my husband. It's our wedding. Yeah. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit, just kind of in generalities, because there may be some couples on here who don't even really know what we're talking about, right? They've never even considered needing insurance. Something I want to mention is, if you're on the search, you're early on and you're looking for venues, that is a question you want to ask, because there's some venues, even here, that we work with that require it. They may require it different parameters, and Alyson can help us with that. But tell us a little bit about what wedding insurance is.
Yeah, absolutely. So what wedding as well as event insurance is, it's a special liability insurance. It's extremely specialized for this particular type of event. So it can cover and protect you and indemnify you as the event host in the case of an accident. So typically, say, for example, somebody trips and falls during the ceremony. The likelihood of what would happen in that case, even if it's, your best friend, your aunt, people, if they have to go to the hospital, they have medical expenses. Sometimes people don't necessarily want to sue you. That's not their objective. But sometimes to be able to, if they need to cover their medical costs, for example, they need to seek litigation. So this particular event coverage will cover not only you and protect your assets, but it will also cover the cost to defend you if there is a circumstance where somebody does pursue to sue you for negligence. And it doesn't necessarily have to be you. It could be a vendor at your event, left water on the floor, for example. Your aunt slips and falls. She has to go to the hospital. She doesn't have the money to be able to cover those costs. So she's going to seek reimbursement. So it pretty much just protects you and your personal assets, especially as a newly married couple. Maybe you guys just purchased a home, and you just want to protect all of those assets and just do your due diligence. So if something like that were to happen, you are protected at a minimal cost and the peace of mind going throughout your day as well.
Yeah.
We started it by saying it's always that plan for the worst and hope for the best. But we have 5 DJs and we always have cords across the thing. And I'm always like, gaff tape is what we use to tape it down. And that's very expensive. And I'm like, but you know what else is expensive? Lawsuits. So tape that cord down. Use that tape. Tape is less expensive than getting sued because somebody tripped on your cord and broke their hip. That's
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it does happen. Especially being in the insurance industry, we get claims all the time. And sometimes they're very minimal. Sometimes they're, an act of God almost, just such random, just, unexpected things. But it's just such a good feeling to know that you have coverage, even if in the worst case scenario, you have some type of coverage and protection.
I wonder if one of our DJs, she tells this story about how the cake, she said, it was like rancid. I swear it was poison. Don't eat the cake. It was like smell. I go, is that something? I wonder, rancid cake. Everybody gets sick.
Well, but that would have come from the vendor, right?
So that'd have been the vendor, but it was just a funny thing that people say, what really happens at weddings? Like, oh, this stuff happens.
Stuff happens. And even in the case, most of the time when attorneys do put together lawsuits, they normally don't just put together one person. They normally put everybody, right? So even if it was just the negligence of a particular vendor, right? Somebody, trips on a cord, wants to sue that vendor. They're most likely also going to include in the lawsuit the venue location, as well as it may be the couple too. So, which is typically why a venue will specifically request insurance. It's not necessarily to protect you, it's to protect them in the case of an incident. Because their insurance might not specifically cover that cause of loss. So they're relying on you to be able to provide that insurance. And you're seeing more and more and more different venues are now requiring insurance. Just specifically, not only just due to COVID, but a lot of the time event insurance policies have become so expensive because the insurance companies have suffered so many losses due to COVID, that a lot of the time the venue's insurance in general, their annual insurance package is so much more expensive. And one of those ways that they can negotiate costs is to pass some of that cost on to their clients, the bride and groom. So to be able to indemnify them, that's why they'll most likely ask for an additional insured certificate, for example.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Like a light bulb just went on for me there when you mentioned that, because it can be kind of confusing. Like, for example, as a company, as one of your vendors, we have insurance, right? So then the venue has insurance, right? So then the couples may be out there asking like, why do then we need it too, right? But you just kind of answered that question. It's an additional layer of protection because you don't know, obviously you're planning for something that you don't know what it's going to be, and it could potentially affect all parties involved.
Yes, absolutely. Typically, when there is a lawsuit, it's easier to just list everybody in the lawsuit, which is typically why, like I said, the venue will request to be named additional insured, as well as you would want your own coverage. Because even if you are listed in a lawsuit, even if you had nothing to do with the cause of loss, this particular insurance event liability covers the cost to defend you, which is huge. The average lawsuit costs $250,000 for the cost to defend you, depending on a bodily injury or property damage cause of loss. So just knowing, and our policy, we offer multiple different coverages under that liability, but just knowing that you can have up to $1 million, the cost to defend you is huge.
Yeah.
That is huge. Well, here in Texas, we're like known for being the most litigious place in the country, I think. So it's like an extra reason, like, we'll go and take that extra coverage on us.
Yeah.
So it would be the couple that, right? So we talked about us as vendors, the venue has their own, but then this is the actual, is it the bride and groom that sign up for it? Is it the families? Who signs up exactly?
It can be either. Typically, it's the bride and groom that want to secure the coverage. And what that would do is if there is some type of cause of loss and they do get named in a lawsuit, it'll cover the cost to defend that individual couple. Because it is typically, it's their wedding. They are considered the event host. So they could be named liable depending on that cause of loss. So we just want to make sure that their coverage is provided to them and it can protect their personal assets as well as the cost to defend them in any different type. There's so many different circumstances of claims for liability. I could spend here all day giving you different examples, but the most common and the most easily and relatable to understand is a slip and fall or a trip and fall. Especially if you have family, older members, exactly what you said, DJ, they have cords, wires, there's gaffer's tape. Sometimes, that's not enough. So, somebody could be, not looking where they're going. And so it can happen all the time.
Oh, sometimes the wedding party comes in and they got this great idea, like, I'm going to pick you up and we'll do a flip. And I'm like, don't, okay. And I'm like, okay, don't break your neck, please. Like, it's because they're sometimes a little bit tipsy at that point.
Yeah,
I'm like,
there's alcohol involved, right?
Let's not do any acrobatics.
Yeah. And we also, we're able to provide liquor liability as well. Which is there's two different types of liquor liability coverage. There's host liquor liability, and then there's liquor liability. So host liquor liability would be, say, for example, you have a venue and you hire a licensed bartender and they're serving. Now they have their own insurance, but same thing as we were going back earlier, if that bartender were to overserve a guest and they were to get into an accident, for example, when it comes down to a lawsuit, most of the time they'll sue the event host, they'll sue the venue, as well as that bartender. So even if you had absolutely no action in overserving a guest, you could still be named in a lawsuit. So that would be host liquor liability. And then there's liquor liability, which isn't eligible in all states. And it depends on so many different factors. But certain states will issue almost like temporary liquor license to be able to serve your own guests. I believe Texas is able to offer almost like a temporary liquor liability license. So you can serve, but that brings a new level of liability to you because you're directly serving your guests and making sure that somebody is of age, not being overserved. All of those things can be included in the special event liability.
And that is, I mean, the rancid cake. I've been doing this a long time. Everybody has a cake. I've never had a rancid cake happen before, but that scenario you're talking about, I mean,
overserving. Yeah.
Pick your night. That is so common.
It does happen.
And even if they're not even, they've already cut them off. People sneak stuff in. The groom's room has booze there. They're still drinking, but it's going to come back and point at the bartender, and then it just snowballs from there, right?
Yeah, because it could be, the groom told me to take a shot. How many times have we done that at weddings, right? And in the case of, a very unfortunate accident, they could be held liable. And it's just so nice to be able to have that peace of mind being like, I have up to $1 million of host liquor liability or liquor liability coverage. So if somebody were to be oversued or overserved, and God forbid something were to happen, if they, injured somebody in a car accident, for example, you have up to $1 million to defend you, which is invaluable when you have 900 things you're trying to worry about on the day of your wedding. One less thing for a minimal cost is just invaluable, in my opinion.
I think so too. And I think it's important, it's hard to think about this being a reality for couples because this is your family, this is your friends, right? Of course, a lot of us want to say that would never happen. Why would they do that? But it's to your point that you brought up earlier, it's out of necessity a lot of times because they're trying to cover their medical bills and the cost of the incident or whatever it may be. It may not be out of malice or...
You mean the person that ends up...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you're talking about these people's family and friends. And so the thought is well, they're not going to ever sue me. Well, you don't know what kind of position someone could be in after something happens.
Well, and we had this scenario happen where it got too rowdy and they literally, it wasn't my event, it was one of our DJs, but they shut the event down and they came right up to him and said, you started this because you played shots on LMFAO shot. I go, what? We're going to be put in the lawsuit because we played the song Shots, which sent them to the bar. And I'm like, wait, Ty. But it
didn't actually get to a lawsuit.
It didn't get to a lawsuit, but I'm just saying, but the venue owner got mad at my DJ, our DJ, because he played that song. I go, wait a minute. Okay.
It'll surprise you where people point the finger.
But to your point, if it was a wily, lawyer, they might say, yeah, throw him in there too. Like, why not?
And that's most likely what happens as well. You want to name everybody. So even if you can prove that you had no negligence, like if you were playing a song, for example, and somebody wants to say that's outrageous, right? In our opinion, that's crazy. But you would still have to pay the cost to defend you, even if it's a completely crazy, bogus, you had nothing to do with it. You could still be responsible for up to $250,000 just to defend yourself, even if it's, you had no negligence. It's just like, this is so silly. For on our film side, I've seen multiple times, and it's sad and people take it very personally. But like one example is it was a short film passion project done through COVID, where it was just like a very simple film, and he had hired a bunch of his family as like extras in the background, for example, and his father-in-law tripped and fell. And he couldn't work for almost a month. He had a knee injury. And his father-in-law did not want to sue him at all. I mean, he didn't want to do that, but he had missed wages, and he had medical expenses, and he had to. And it wasn't necessarily something that, he wanted to do. It wasn't done out of malice, but it was a necessity. He had to. He had to pursue some way to, cover his costs and cover himself.
Well, and in the case of insurance, just so I understand this, if he were to sue then his son, right, or son-in-law, because the son-in-law had insurance, he's only out of pocket what he was paying for the insurance, right? The insurance policy would cover. Did you see what I'm saying?
Yes, correct. So for liability, for the special event liability program that we have, there's $0 deductible. So if you were to be sued, say, for example, you requested to play the song Shots, right? And you were named in the lawsuit. And even as, wild as it is to be named, all you would be responsible for is the insurance premium that you paid up front. There would be no cost to defend. The attorney would be afforded to you under your policy and would be responsible for protecting you in court. So you would, our minimum premium for event liability, it's based on a couple different factors. One is the coverage. The second is the number of people. But say, for example, you were having a small wedding under 100 people and you purchased general liability, that's up to $1 million for $100, And not only are you satisfying the venue, which if they require it, but, for as little as $100, you can say, you know what, I can't insure maybe an awkward conversation with my mother-in-law, but I can insure something that could really hurt me financially in the long run. As minimal as a chance it may be, it's still always a risk.
What's crazy is people always talk about weddings are so expensive. That is probably the least expensive thing across the entire spectrum. You just went down this road. You know how quickly things can add up. But $100 to be insured up to $1 million. I mean, that is that is a drop in the whale, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And in not only the fact, so most of the time when I do get couples that reach out to me, it's normally, I just need it because my venue wants it. And which I completely understand. Adding any additional cost when you're already spending so much money for a wedding, I get it. I completely understand. I've been there. It's like one more thing for something that may happen, but just knowing that peace of mind that your personal assets are protected for $100, it's just so worth it.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. I wanted to ask you this. What is covered and what isn't? You know what I mean? Like, what is the difference between maybe like an act of God and then like an accident or something? Like, is there some guidance you can give us on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to every single type of claim is going to be completely different depending on who was negligent in the action. Were they negligent in the action? Was it a complete accident, right? Like it's always going to kind of change. But what liability pretty much comes down to is bodily injury and property damage. So a bodily injury example would be the classic slip and fall. Somebody trips over a DJ cord, they're injured, and they sue you for those medical expenses or your negligence. You knew that cord was there, and I received bodily injury, and you could have protected it, so it was your negligence. So that's one example of how a general liability can also pay out. Another is property damage. Say, for example, when you sign an event contract, you're liable for that building at that time. So say, for example, you have your wedding, you are in your reception, and a motorcyclist drives into the building and breaks a bunch of windows. It's happened before.
Wow, that's okay.
Very specific, but it can happen because the venue is considered in your care, custody, or control at that particular time. You may be held responsible by the venue for that property damage. So those are the two main, and then also liquor liability if you do have that exposure for your event. So the host liquor liability. So that's basically liability is the cost to defend you when we look at what a general liability policy is. It's the same thing if you think about your particular auto insurance. Your auto liability is if somebody were to sue you from your negligence, which is the comprehension side for personal lines of insurance, whereas collision is the physical damage. So if you just have auto liability, if you were to run into a pole, your insurance company is not going to pay for the physical damage portion of that, right? So that's kind of like the two aspects of general liability is, and it could be damage to rented premises, bodily injury, or property damage. It could all be covered under the general liability.
So you mentioned $100. Is that like a range? Could they go cheaper, like with 75, and then they get the best? A couple could get the best, like 250 or something like that. Is that like a range, or is that pretty standard?
Well, listeners get $25 off of the $100, so $75. And we actually have an event code that you would use at checkout, and it's USA event at checkout, and you receive $25 off. So
I didn't even know that was coming. That was like totally unprovoked. It was like I set you up nicely for that little discount there. There you go.
Did. Yeah, that was perfect. But yeah, for listeners, you can have $25 off, so you can receive up to $1 million of coverage for $75, less than $100.
I love it. I mean, again, it's not like the most glamorous thing for your wedding. Like we're not talking about floral centerpieces or, your wedding dress, but this is real life. Right?
Yeah.
Like this is the reality of like living today. And we, as we'll bring it back to the beginning, we experienced it through COVID. I will tell you that there were a lot of couples who were out a lot of money because of, their experience. And not to say it was such a unique time that the insurance policies during that time probably were not going to be able to catch up with what was happening. But now we can learn from that, right? And know that unexpected things happen and that insurance is valuable.
Absolutely. And so, and to speak to that as well, so many different event insurance companies offered cancellation coverage or like a force majeure exclusion. So they could receive compensation for any of the money that they had spent. But now, due to COVID, there's so many different exclusions that insurance companies have added on. One of them is a communicable disease exclusion. You'll see on most special event policies. So if you were to, plan your wedding tomorrow and, the groom caught COVID, this particular policy can't cover that. No insurance policy or no insurance company, because it's just the scope, it was a guaranteed loss, like a year ago. So no insurance company will offer that right now, but it is definitely something in the works. We are working on, it's not necessarily, it's not secured yet, but one of the things we are looking to ensure is actual physical content. So say, for example, if you were to have gifts and they were to be stolen, that's something that we're working on. Also, another thing that we're trying to work on is rented equipment. For my wedding, for example, it was more a open kind of grassy area where we had our ceremony, and I had to rent an arch. I had to rent multiple kind of like prop items, and a lot of the particular, rental houses, places were requiring insurance for the coverage if it were to be damaged. So that is something that we do. This program is still relatively young. It's only been going for less than a year now, but we do have plenty of plans to expand in the future.
Well, that is
a thing.
Unfortunately, the thing with stolen guest or the gift card has
stolen guests,
gifts, not guests, but or just like people know those envelopes going into that big thing. We've had conversations. I don't know if it ever panned out that it was stolen, but people have been like, "Where is it? It was there, and now it's not there."
Yes,
those conversations have happened. People have had to cancel weddings for a variety of reasons, like just something happened. They sold the venue. The new venue is not going to be a wedding. I mean, those. Yeah. Weird things like that happen because you're talking about from the day you drop the deposit, potentially 18 months later, there's a lot that can change. Again, we're not trying to be doom and gloom, but it's just, but for $75 to say like, go ahead, knock yourself out. I'm ready. that's you sleep a little better at night because there's enough other things that are going to keep you up while you're planning your wedding. But.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I keep saying, it's invaluable to have that one peace of mind. It's just like, things can go wrong, but at least I'm not going to be able to, subject myself to be able to potentially lose my personal assets and everything that I've worked so hard for. That whether that be a vehicle, a home, if you have your own business, all of those things could be jeopardized if you go to court and if you are found negligent. All of those things can, be put on the line. Unfortunately, if you don't have a coverage in place.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what happens if a couple wants to go to the website and sign up. Tell a little bit about the process, like how easy it is.
So easy. So it's usaevents.frontrowinsurance. I actually have to double check that. But I'll confirm. So you just go on the website, you click start here, you just put in your state, just a couple other simple questions, how many attendees you have. And then in less than a minute, you're generated with a premium based on the number of people that you have in attendance, as well as the coverages. Host liquor liability, for example, is a little bit of additional premium. And then we also offer increased limits. So some venues, for example, will require $2 million instead of $1 million. We have that option to be able to provide you. And then you just put checkout, you put in your discount code, you get $25 off. And as soon as you bind coverage, you get an email that's generated directly to you with proof of insurance, which will have a certificate of insurance with the venue's name already on it. So you don't have to do anything. You get a policy, your invoice, and then if you do need any additional insured certificates or documentation, you can always call me, send me an email, and we can get that to you by the end of the day.
And if you want to have that axe throwing at your event, right? That's good to know. See? We've had that too. You had a bar mitzvah and they were doing it on property. Here came the wagon with the axe throwing.
Let's touch on that for a second. If someone had axe throwing at their event, like this is unique, right? Obviously to like, do you think that would like fall under, like if someone was injured during that, like maybe you don't know the answer to this question, but I'm just curious, like.
We're way in the weeds.
So certain activities are considered excluded by the carrier and they're not considered favorable or we're able to quote under this policy. So for example, there's a couple limitations and restrictions on this policy. The first thing is that it only covers a one-day event. Now there's 24-hour coverage before for setup and there's 24-hour coverage the day after for teardown. So you do have technically, it's only 1 day event liability coverage, but there is technically 3 days of coverage when you purchase.
Oh, that's good, because that's when people are up and down ladders on setup and teardown too, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So that you technically have the 3 days of coverage. So, but it is only for 1 day events. But on the platform, it will guide you directly. It'll have a list of hazardous activities, knife throwing, pyro, there's all.
Here it would be.
Yes, like there's a haunted house. There's a couple random ones on there. So you just kind of review. I believe there's about like 30 activities. You just kind of scroll through, be like, okay, I don't have any, deep underwater diving. Okay, great, at my wedding. So you just click that you understand. And if there are any, say, for example, you have a really unique venue, you have a really unique idea for your wedding. Maybe the online event liability platform is not, the best, but we can still find you coverage through other markets. And just to go back a little bit, so we are a brokerage. So for commercial insurance, it's different than that of personal insurance. So if you wanted to get insurance for your new car, you would go online and you would contact Geico, Progressive, Allstate, any of those, right? For a commercial insurance, which is event liability is considered commercial, you cannot go directly to the insurance company. You need to go through a broker, similar to like a real estate agent, for example. You need to go through a broker. And then what my job is to find you the best coverage at the best cost. And as well is my responsibility as well is if there is a claim is to guide you through that and to make sure that the insurance company lives up to their expectations. So that is what we're here for, is to kind of guide you and help you, and especially in the case of a claim.
So let me ask you this. So if the online form, like they go through that process and they don't see that it's sufficient, could they still reach out to you for other options?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've had a couple clients that reach out to be like, I'm having a wedding in Italy. Okay, so our online event liability platform does not cover international weddings, but we do have other markets that do offer worldwide or foreign event liability coverage, and we could still obtain you a quote. It's not going to be at the same rate because it does fall outside of the guidelines, but we're still able to obtain coverage. Same thing. There's a couple of sometimes venues will require multiple days of coverage. They'll ask for coverage I've seen recently, they'll require a week of coverage before the event, or, a couple days before, a couple days after. Well, this event liability program we're not able to add all of those different coverage dates. So what we can do is the same thing. We can go to a different market. It will be a little bit more expensive. The premiums won't be as in line as what we've spoken about today, but we're still able to provide you coverage and be able to satisfy those requirements of the venue.
I love it. So that's like something for everyone, right? So we're just not limited to what's online, but the program online will cover probably a majority of events that are happening. So it's good to know that your company can really take care of anyone, right?
I have a Texas one you might want to add to that drop-down box. Mechanical bull. I've seen that. You're like, we're going to put the mechanical bull. Then Uncle Charlie gets thrown into the buffet line and the sterno burned him right on the leg.
Yeah, that's very specific. I would have to check the policy to see if something like that could potentially be covered. But yeah, things happen. And there's definitely so many things that can kind of go out of the box. So, and if you're not sure, you can always reach out to me. We have an events at frontrowinsurance.com specific email address, but you can always contact me as well. I'll give you guys my contact information. So if you're ever have a particular event that kind of falls outside of the box a little bit, you're not necessarily sure if that specific our online event liability program is perfect for you or your event, you can always give us a call. You can call and talk to me directly, and I can advise you and let you know, oh, okay, well, maybe we need to secure other types of coverages to make sure that, sometimes venues will require coverage for the vendors. under that policy, which is not something that's covered under this particular program, but we can go to different markets and find coverage that would be able to.
That's very helpful.
And if you are listening, don't put the mechanical bull close to the buffet. That's just a little, just a side note on a little tip.
So anything else, Alyson, you think is important for our listeners to know that you want to share, that we make sure we get out there for all the couples that are listening?
Yeah, absolutely. The best thing that I can really advise is, it takes 1 minute to get a quote. You can hold on to that quote for 30 days. Think about it, but just kind of weigh the options. I know it's something that's so random and dramatic, but so is COVID. Nobody expected something like that. And I know for me, it really turned my world upside down. And I mean, claims happen. Last week, I had a client and they had their tent covering the DJ. There was really strong winds. The winds knocked it over, and it knocked over a couple guests that were injured. Who would have thought, right? I mean, and who would have thought? But, at least they know that, that was obviously not something that they would have had prefer on their wedding day, but at least knowing that, okay, you know what, that happened. It's not going to destroy the day. But at least I have coverage to know that I am personally protected and that my future husband or wife is also protected as well if this were to pursue into a lawsuit.
Correct. Yeah.
I was glad they were looking out for the DJ. Got a tent for the DJ. That's so nice.
I was talking to the bride. It was very warm outside and they wanted to provide a little cover for the DJ, and it was tied down, but the winds were just so strong when they were starting the wedding that could have knocked out the bride or, the father, the groom, and, and coverage would have been afforded. And I mean, it's unfortunate to provide injury to those guests, but it's just that peace of mind knowing that, this new house that I just purchased with my new husband is not going to be jeopardized because of the most random, experience that could happen.
Because the stupid DJ didn't want to have a sunburn on his head.
That's you. So you guys, okay, this has been so informative and helpful. I mean, I learned stuff I think I should have probably known before, but Alyson, we certainly appreciate you joining us, and we're going to link all of this information in the show notes. There's a blog on our site that will be live by the time this episode goes out. So you guys can check that out too with additional information. Make sure that you reach out to Alyson, that you reach out to Front Row Insurance if you have any other questions, and that you use the code. Remind us of the code again, Alyson.
USA event at checkout for $25 off.
Boom.
Nice.
It all adds up. Every discount adds up.
Yeah, it's every penny helps. So we will end this podcast the way we end every podcast, right, honey?
We do. We have like a little theme. It's like a little ending credits, sort of. It's a very personal day. Don't let somebody talk you into something you don't want to do or talk you out of something you have your heart set on. It's your day. Just put the blinders on, look at your fiance and say, what should we do? There you go.
And we should probably get insurance.
And you should probably get insurance.
Maybe get insurance. Yeah.
They gave us a code, babe. It's $25 off.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So we're going to end it with a kiss. If you'd like to enjoy, join us.
Kisses.
We're blowing
Ready?
kisses, Alyson. Happy wedding planning.
Mwah.
Happy wedding planning, team.
Bye. Hey, so thanks for listening to our podcast. If you found any of this information helpful and you know someone who may be engaged or is a maid of honor, maybe you could tell them and share it with a friend.
Absolutely. So screenshot this episode, share it on Instagram, on Facebook, and tag the wedding duo. We promise to share the love back. Also, if you are interested in more resources or the show notes, you can go to theweddingduo.co. We have one-on-one virtual sessions, a shop, all sorts of fun stuff. Check it out.